This ice is from the Viking Age, around the year 1000, also called the medieval warm period. We believe that in Greenland, the medieval warm period was about 1.5 degrees warmer on average than today.
Nordgrip, the Greenland ice core project, is being reopened to drill the last few meters through the ice sheet to the rock beneath the research station. The ice core, over 3 kilometers in length, has been hauled up to the surface piece by piece and contains important data on the history of the climate of the Earth. It bears the fingerprints of climatic conditions over more than 120,000 years.
When we remove or drill the ice core, we leave a hole, and we insert a thermometer in the hole. We are able to map out the temperature through the 3-kilometer ice sheet. Now that temperature, if we do it precisely enough, a thousandth of a degree accuracy, then the ice has not forgotten how cold or warm it was on the surface at the time the snow fell. So, using those temperatures, we have been able to reconstruct the temperatures of the last 10,000 years. Here we have our picture of the temperature reconstructions that we have from Greenland in a graphical form. And if we go back along this axis, it's going back in time. This is the last 8,000 years we have plotted here. On this axis we have the temperatures at the site in Greenland, and we can see that if we go back from now about 4,000 years ago, we would have temperatures up here for about 4,000 years that were 2.5 degrees warmer on average than today. Now, as we approach our time, we can see that in the period between 4,000 years ago and back to the period 2,000 years ago, which is actually the Roman age, the temperatures have been decreasing in Greenland by 2.5 degrees. Then the temperatures increased gradually up to a maximum point around the medieval warm period, we call it 1,000 years ago. And then temperatures declined and goes down to a minimum around 1650 AD, comes back up a little in the 18th century, and then around 1875 we have the lowest point in the last 8,000 years, right here, and that matches exactly the time when meteorological observations started.
Other core samples from elsewhere in Greenland confirm that the Little Ice Age ended about 140 years ago, at the coldest point in the last 10,000 years. The natural, pronounced alteration of warm and cold periods back in time has also been confirmed elsewhere in the Northern Hemisphere. Carbon-14 dating of organic matter from peat bogs and tree rings confirms the pattern. So do data from stalactite caves in China and measurements from North Africa.
The problem is that and I agree completely that we have had a global temperature increase in the 20th century. Yes, but an increase from what? Probably an increase from the lowest point we've had for the last 10,000 years. And this means that it will be very hard indeed to prove whether the increase of temperature in the 20th century was man-made or it's a natural variation. That will be very hard because we made ourselves an extremely poor experiment. We started to observe meteorology at the coldest spot in the last 10,000 years.
到有人喺度清路障喎，竟然嗱咁啊見到啦，有一啲市民啦就喺度清路障嘅，咁啊會唔會引起一啲事嘅發生咧？咁啊唔知㗎，係咪男？咁我哋見到啦，有一個唔知乜嘢人嘅市民啦，就喺度清路障㗎嚇。咁啊，會唔會引申成私了嘅出現咧？咁啊，我哋大家
停手先，乜嘢？我哋老母啊！好啊！咩你？
咁啊，見到呢位市民啦，咁啊，佢啊唔知喺度搞乜鳩嘢，好似搭親咁撚樣㗎嚇。咁啊，戇撚鳩鳩啊，柒撚懵懵咁撚樣啦。咁啊，見到現場嘅救護人員咧，都將佢救下啦嚇。冇懶撚曬型咁撚嘢啫。咁我哋見到啦，呢一位，咁啊，見到個傻撚閪閪啦，而家嚇。咁啊，傻撚閪閪出現啦。咁我哋做一個近距離嘅拍照啦嚇。咁啊，多謝大家收睇啦。咁啊，有個柒撚懵懵喺度，唔知做乜鳩嘢啦嚇。咁啊，應該係跌親嘅呢個市民就。
哇！你好撚型啊！你睇下你，大灣區需要你。
Some professionalism. That's all I ask. Despite having only 5% of the world's population, China has allowed 500,000 of their citizens to die from COVID-19, which is 20% of the world total. At least a third of those deaths are due to the fact that China does not guarantee their people health care. I'm sorry, that's the United States. Yeah, our government is the one that's killed 500,000 of our people and doesn't give everyone health care. Getting back to China's human rights abuses, they have the largest prison state in the world, regularly imprisoning over 2 million people every year. They are also quite racist, despite the fact that ethnic minorities only make up a third of their population under 18 years of age. They make up 2/3 of those under 18 incarcerated. So China is locking up children basically because their skin color or ethnicity is different than the... Oh, that's America too. God damn it! I see it now. The U.S. is the biggest prison state in the world, locking up 2 million people every year. Listen, guys, you need to mark the pages a little more clearly. Some professionalism. That's all I ask. Okay, let's get back to human rights violations by China. People of color are 3 times as likely to be killed by police in China. Nope! America! For shit's sake! I swear now we're on to China. This is some pretty gnarly stuff, okay? Rather than cooperating with the world to help end this pandemic, China has weaponized medical care and vaccines, withholding them from countries that it considers adversaries and dropping bombs in 7 countries around the world, causing untold destruction, death, and misery. I mean, China is truly a fucking monster of a country. Wait, it's the United States too? Everything in here is about the United States. Jesus! Who researched this shit?
The Japanese government officially decided on Tuesday to release radioactive wastewater from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant into the ocean. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken even thanked Japan on Twitter for its transparent efforts in handling the wastewater. This deserves a thank you. Amazing. It is like turning a funeral to a happy event. If the radioactive wastewater really is up to standard and completely safe, then wouldn't it just be better to use the water to fill a man-made lake in Japan? Japan is obviously throwing a problem they feel extremely uneasy about into the ocean and letting all of humankind deal with the crisis. Of all the ways of disposing this radioactive wastewater, releasing it into the ocean is the easiest and the cheapest. Japan's calculations are shrewd. If it were other country, Washington wouldn't be like this, without criticism and praised it instead. It's doing it in exchange for further strategic loyalty from Japan. And there's another reason. The US is half a world away from Japan. But the Fukushima area has some of the strongest currents of the Pacific. Radioactive material will eventually drift into the world's oceans. Don't think that you'll be spared, America.
別に水飲んでもなんちゅうことないそうですから。
日本个别官员称这些水喝了也没事儿，那请他喝了再说。
Video going viral of another frightening attack targeting an Asian American. This one happening today in San Francisco. A woman simply standing next to a lamppost with her small shopping cart when a man walked up and started hitting her in the face. She was 70 years old. She suffered a bruised face and a swollen eye. You see the blood on her face, but she fought back.
We have lived in the shadows, invisible.
We are George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Say there.
I will challenge everyone here. If you see something, will you help me? Yes. If you see one of our sisters and brothers in need, will you help us?
When COVID started to happen and all the sort of political rhetoric from Trump, China virus, Kung flu, all those kind of things, it was just shocking to see that our country has, kind of devolved to this state.
I was speaking to a pollster during the recent elections, and I asked him why, when I see polling results broken down by race, do I so rarely see Asian Americans as a separate category? He heard my question, he looked me dead in the eye, and he said, because Asian Americans are considered statistically insignificant.
Oh no, I
Okay, can you define propaganda? Like, I think I know, but like, how is it? What's the mechanism?
If the agenda, say, is to like get like Matt Gaetz right now, he's like this Republican, like he's a problem for the Democratic Party because he's so conservative, right? And he can cause a lot of hiccups in passing of laws. So it would be great for the Democratic Party to get him out. So we're going to keep running those stories to keep hurting him and make it so that it can't be buried and like just, you know, settled outside of court and just like, you know, if we keep pushing that, it's helping us. That's propaganda. It's helping us in some way.
Remember when 4-star General Wesley Clark revealed this 2006 Pentagon plan?
He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Well, 2 of those 7 countries are Uganda's neighbors, and both saw Uganda lead the charge for U.S. intervention. First in Somalia, where Uganda invaded in 2007 under U.S. command, and second in Sudan, where Uganda played a major role in the U.S. desired division of the nation into 2 separate countries. That's how South Sudan was created in 2011, home to 70% of Sudan's oil. But Uganda has also proved its loyalty to the U.S. empire outside of Africa too. Like, you probably didn't know that Uganda sent around 10,000 soldiers to Iraq in 2006 to help the U.S. fight and occupy the country. U.S. military forces routinely operate in Uganda for training, military exercises, and joint combat operations under the U.S.-led African Rapid Response Partnership.
Of every citizen's vote, obviously. You wonder if people even debate questions like this in countries that don't hate themselves, countries like Japan or South Korea or Israel. Go to the Anti-Defamation League's website sometime if you'd like a glimpse of what an unvarnished conversation about a country's national interest might look like. In a short essay posted to the site, the ADL explains why the state of Israel should not allow more Arabs to become citizens with voting rights. Quote, with historically high birth rates among the Palestinians and a possible influx of Palestinian refugees and their descendants now living around the world, the ADL explains, Jews would quickly become a minority within a binational state, thus likely ending any semblance of equal representation and protections. In this situation, the Jewish population would be increasingly politically and potentially physically vulnerable. It is unrealistic and unacceptable, the ADL continues, to expect the state of Israel to voluntarily subvert its own sovereign existence and nationalist identity and become a vulnerable minority within what was once its own territory, end quote. Now, from Israel's perspective, this makes perfect sense. Why would any democratic nation make its own citizens less powerful? Isn't that the deepest betrayal of all? In the words of the ADL, why would a government subvert its own sovereign existence? Good question. Maybe ADL President Jonathan Greenblatt will join us sometime to explain and tell us whether that same principle applies to the United States. Most Americans believe it does. Unfortunately, most Americans don't have a say in the matter. Most Americans aren't even allowed to have the conversation. So they watch from the sidelines as their democracy is murdered by people who claim to be its defenders. Democracy, 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 screams the Twitter mob, even as the votes of the people who were born here decline steadily in